It was the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century, and the deadliest legend ever whispered in the deserts of Egypt. November 1922. Deep in the Valley of the Kings, a team of British archaeologists brushed sand from an ancient sealed doorway. Behind it lay treasures untouched for over 3,000 years, the tomb of a forgotten boy king. But when they broke the seal, something else was unleashed. Something the ancient priests had promised would strike down anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. Within months, people began to die. Some suddenly, some in ways too strange to be coincidence. The world called it the pharaoh's curse. But before the deaths, before the fear, there was a man obsessed, and a discovery that changed history forever. This is where the story begins. The man who found the tomb was no ordinary archaeologist. Howard Carter was obsessive, stubborn, and considered reckless by his peers. Born in 1874, he had no formal education in archaeology, but he had one thing others lacked: an artist's eye and unshakable determination. By the early 1900s, most archaeologists believed the Valley of the Kings had yielded all its secrets. Tomb after tomb had been opened, looted, or collapsed centuries earlier. Many thought nothing new remained. But Carter disagreed. He believed there was one more tomb, a small hidden chamber belonging to Tutankhamun, a boy king who had ruled briefly around 1332 BCE before vanishing from history. Carter spent 5 years digging, searching, and running out of money. Other archaeologists mocked him. Newspapers called his work a fool's treasure hunt. But Carter refused to quit. In 1917, he began working under the patronage of Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy British aristocrat who funded his expeditions. By 1922, after years of disappointment, Carnarvon warned Carter he had one last season to find anything, or the funding would stop. Carter promised him they were close. And he was right. On November 4th, 1922, a water boy stumbled upon a strange stone step near the entrance of Ramses VI's tomb. Carter's team began digging, uncovering a staircase leading down into the earth. At the bottom, they found a sealed doorway bearing ancient symbols, the royal cartouche of Tutankhamun. Carter's heart raced. After centuries of tomb robbers, to find a seal intact was almost impossible. They cleared the entrance carefully, removing stones and debris. Carter sent a telegram to Lord Carnarvon. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. Carnarvon rushed to Egypt immediately. By November 24th, Carter, Carnarvon, and Carnarvon's daughter, Lady Evelyn, stood before the sealed tomb. Carter drilled a small hole, inserted a candle, and peered inside. Carnarvon, breathless, asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter whispered the now famous words, "Yes. Wonderful things." Gold reflected in the candlelight. Statues, chests, strange animals carved in wood, glittering jewelry. Everything a pharaoh might need in the afterlife. But what Carter didn't know then, or chose to ignore, was the ancient warning carved on one of the guardian statues. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. On February 16, 1923, they officially opened the burial chamber. What they found stunned the world. Inside was a series of nested shrines, each layered inside the other like a Russian doll, coated in gold. At the center was the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, his famous golden death mask staring back with eternal, haunting calm. Tutankhamun had died young, around 18 or 19 years old. His reign had been short, his name nearly erased from history by later pharaohs. Yet his tomb, untouched for over 3,000 years, preserved a treasure trove beyond imagination. There were over 5,000 artifacts, golden thrones, chariots, statues, weapons, even jars of wine and food for the afterlife. The press called it the greatest archaeological find in history. The world was captivated. But among the local Egyptians, whispers grew louder. The tomb had been sealed for a reason. Breaking it could bring misfortune. Priests in ancient times had placed curses on tombs to protect the pharaohs from grave robbers. Carter dismissed these stories as superstition. But soon even he began to wonder. Because only weeks after the opening, the curse seemed to awaken. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the discovery, was the first to die. On April 5, 1923, just 2 months after entering the tomb, he was bitten by a mosquito on his cheek. The bite became infected after he accidentally cut it while shaving. Within days, blood poisoning set in. He died suddenly in Cairo at age 56. The moment he died, strange events were reported. All the lights in Cairo flickered and went out for a few minutes. In England, his dog, a fox terrier named Susie, howled and dropped dead at the same hour. Newspapers exploded with headlines, "Death comes to tomb's disturber," and "The Pharaoh's curse strikes." The legend had begun. Carnarvon's death triggered panic. People who had entered the tomb began falling ill or reporting strange accidents. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmi Bey, an Egyptian prince who visited the tomb, was shot dead by his wife in London. George J. Gould III, an American financier who toured the tomb, developed a fever and died shortly after. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, suffered blood poisoning and died mysteriously months later. Hugh Evelyn White, an archaeologist involved in cataloging artifacts, hanged himself, leaving a note allegedly saying, "I have succumbed to the curse." Even those who hadn't entered the tomb but had handled objects from it reported misfortunes. The press fueled the hysteria, publishing long lists of victims. Some deaths were coincidence, others harder to explain. And yet, Howard Carter himself remained untouched. He dismissed every rumor as nonsense, calling it Tommy rot invented by journalists. Carter even joked about the curse, saying, "If there were such things as curses, I wouldn't be alive to laugh at them." But even Carter experienced strange events he couldn't fully explain. His beloved pet canary was killed by a cobra, the very symbol of Egyptian kingship, on the day the tomb was opened. Workers reported hearing strange noises from the sealed chambers at night, whispers, soft thuds, as if something moved inside. Carter himself later wrote in his diary about feeling watched when alone in the tomb. Still, he pressed on, cataloging every artifact, determined to finish the work. But more deaths would follow, and the world would soon believe that Tutankhamun's wrath was real. If this first chapter gave you chills, hit like, share this mystery with someone who loves dark history, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Because in the next chapter, we dive into the full list of deaths, bizarre coincidences, and the moments that made even scientists believe the curse might be real. A dead lord, a chain of mysterious deaths, and a golden tomb that seemed to whisper, "I warned you." By the summer of 1923, the world had turned on Howard Carter's discovery. What had begun as a triumph of archaeology was now a story of terror. Newspapers screamed of the Pharaoh's curse. Superstitious locals avoided the Valley of the Kings. Even hardened scientists began to wonder, because the deaths weren't random. They followed a pattern. Everyone connected to the tomb seemed marked. And as the list of victims grew, one question echoed across the world. Did Tutankhamun kill from beyond the grave? Let's follow the trail of bodies. Lord Carnarvon's death had been the first strike. A mosquito bite turned fatal infection, lights flickering in Cairo, and his dog dying at the same moment in England. The newspapers devoured it, calling it the Pharaoh's first warning. British tabloids printed warnings like, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king." Reporters camped outside Carter's camp, counting every new illness as a sign. Some journalists even bribed Egyptian locals for rumors, feeding the fire. And the deaths kept coming. George J. Gould III. The curse crosses oceans. The wealthy American financier visited the tomb months after its opening. Shortly after returning to France, he developed a sudden fever. Doctors called it pneumonia, but within 24 hours, Gould was dead. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmi Bey, the Egyptian tragedy. This young Egyptian prince had entered the tomb during Carter's work. Weeks later, in London, his wife shot him dead in a scandalous murder that made global headlines. Newspapers claimed the Pharaoh strikes in London. Hugh Evelyn White, the archaeologist's suicide. Evelyn White, a British archaeologist who catalogued some artifacts, hanged himself in 1924. Reports claimed he left a chilling note written in his own blood. "I have succumbed to the curse." Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother Herbert, already ill with a long-term infection, suddenly worsened and died shortly after visiting Carnarvon's grave. Locals whispered, "The curse claimed the family." Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist. Douglas Reed was the first to X-ray Tutankhamun's mummy. Days later, he died from a mysterious illness doctors couldn't explain. And this was just the beginning. By 1929, over 20 people linked to the tomb had died in strange ways. Several deaths were eerily similar: high fevers, sudden infections, or unexplained organ failure. Some victims reported strange dreams before dying, dreams of golden masks watching them, or whispers in a language they didn't understand. A French archaeologist, who barely escaped death after falling ill, claimed, "I felt a hand pressing on my chest while I slept, as if someone was holding me down." Was it psychological panic? Or something else? Carter himself began noticing his workers were terrified. Some refused to enter the tomb after dark. Egyptian laborers performed purification rituals before touching any object. Even hardened British scientists, who once mocked the curse, began to avoid entering the burial chamber. Not all deaths were illnesses. Some were freak accidents so bizarre they fueled the curse narrative. Lord Westbury, a man who catalogued artifacts, fell to his death from his home's roof in 1923. His suicide note allegedly read, "I cannot endure the horrors any longer." His son, who worked with the objects, died suddenly just weeks earlier. A car accident killed one of Carter's team members as he transported artifacts to Cairo. His vehicle allegedly lost control near a cliff, as if something pushed it, according to a witness. Meanwhile, back in Britain, museum staff handling artifacts from the tomb reported accidents: slipping downstairs, sudden fainting, or being struck by falling crates. The press compiled these into ominous lists, publishing headlines like, "The Pharaoh takes his revenge one by one." Through it all, Howard Carter survived. While others fell ill or died, Carter continued working, almost defiant. He openly mocked the curse, saying, "Death has no power over those who respect the science of the past." But even Carter faced strange moments. His beloved pet canary was famously killed by a cobra on the same day the tomb was opened. Locals called it a sign. The cobra was the ancient symbol of Egyptian royalty, protecting the king. Carter also described unsettling moments in his diary: doors found unlocked after he sealed them, small objects mysteriously moved, and once, a faint scratching sound from within one of the sealed shrines when no one was inside. Carter dismissed these events publicly, but privately, his notes show moments of unease. The man who uncovered the greatest treasure in archaeology started looking over his shoulder. By late 1923, the legend had spread beyond Egypt. Spiritualists and psychics claimed to hear Tutankhamun's spirit warning of more deaths. Seances were held in London with mediums communicating with the pharaoh. Tourists flocked to Egypt, not just to see the tomb, but to feel the presence. Egyptian locals avoided the site altogether, believing it cursed. Even King George V reportedly warned British officials to be cautious about keeping too many artifacts in London. The curse had transformed from superstition into global hysteria. And the more people tried to explain it away, the stranger the coincidences became. But were these deaths truly supernatural? Or just convenient stories for newspapers hungry for drama? In the next chapter, we dig into the science and the shocking discoveries that suggest there might have been something real behind the pharaoh's curse. If this episode left you wondering whether the curse was real or just a deadly coincidence, hit like, share this with someone who loves mysteries, and drop your theory in the comments. Because in the final episode, we reveal the scientific theories, the modern investigations, and why Tutankhamun's tomb still scares people even today. For years, death followed everyone who touched Tutankhamun's tomb. Was it a curse, or just bad luck twisted into legend? In this final chapter, we separate superstition from science, from poisonous tomb air to political cover-ups, and uncover why the pharaoh's curse still haunts us today. And when you hear the last piece of this puzzle, you might just wonder if the curse is still alive. By 1924, Egypt had become the center of the world's attention. Reporters flocked to every new death, turning accidents into supernatural revenge. But scientists weren't convinced. Douglas Derry, an anatomist who examined Tutankhamun's mummy, mocked the curse. "If there is such a thing, I should be dead by now." He lived for years after. Others argued the so-called victims were already sick or old. Lord Carnarvon, for example, had a history of health issues. Yet, even skeptics admitted the timing of some deaths felt uncanny. Decades later, modern science provided a shocking possibility. The tomb itself may have been deadly. Naturally. When Tutankhamun's tomb was sealed 3,000 years ago, it trapped more than treasures. Inside were toxic molds and bacteria, possibly including Aspergillus flavus, which can produce lethal spores. Opening the tomb released these spores into the air. Anyone with weak immunity, like Lord Carnarvon, could develop deadly infections. Studies in the 1980s found traces of bacteria and mold on ancient mummies capable of causing respiratory failure. The theory explained why some died suddenly, but not why Carter and others lived unharmed. Maybe the curse didn't strike everyone equally, only the vulnerable. Still, not all deaths fit this explanation. Suicides, accidents, and strange coincidences couldn't be blamed on mold alone. Conspiracy theorists argue the curse narrative may have been encouraged deliberately. Why? To keep looters and political rivals away from the tomb's riches. Carter himself might have secretly fueled the rumors. After all, the more people feared the curse, the fewer would dare interfere with his work. Some letters between Carter and Carnarvon hinted at sensitive matters, possibly artifacts smuggled out illegally. A curse was the perfect distraction. Was the pharaoh's curse partly manufactured? Tutankhamun himself became the subject of scientific curiosity. Who was this boy king that inspired such terror? In 1968, X-rays of his mummy revealed a bone fragment in his skull, leading to speculation he had been murdered. Some believed his death had been violent, adding weight to the idea of vengeance from beyond the grave. But later CT scans in 2005 suggested he likely died from a broken leg infection combined with malaria. Not murder, just tragic fate. Yet some archaeologists argue ancient priests may have still placed protective spells on his tomb, believing his soul needed to be defended from robbers. Curses were real to them, and maybe that belief alone had power. Even in modern times, the legend continues to haunt. When Tutankhamun's treasures toured the world in the 1970s, museum staff reported accidents, falls, and illnesses. In 1972, when the exhibition opened in London, a guard collapsed and died near the Golden Mask, reigniting public fear. In 2010, when CT scans were performed on Tutankhamun, some researchers claimed their computers crashed mysteriously multiple times when analyzing his skull. Coincidence? Or the king reminding the world he was still watching? Howard Carter died peacefully in 1939 at age 64. Proof, many said, that the curse wasn't real. But even in death, his story was eerie. At his funeral, a black jackdaw bird was seen sitting on his coffin. Locals whispered it was the spirit of the pharaoh watching his hunter one last time. And what about Tutankhamun? His name, once erased by his successors, is now immortal. Ironically, the boy who was almost forgotten became the most famous pharaoh in history because of the very curse meant to scare people away. Was it real? Science says no. Logic says coincidence. But look at the pattern, the timing, the fear that followed this tomb like a shadow. And you might wonder if the ancients knew something we don't. Maybe the curse wasn't just about killing people. Maybe it was about something far more powerful, making the world never forget the boy king. And in that, the curse worked perfectly. If this final chapter gave you chills, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this story with someone who loves history's mysteries. And if you want more forgotten legends and dark truths from the past, subscribe to HistoryMind, where history's secrets never stay buried.